I'm Ollie Ollerton, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go.
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. If this is your first time here, we sit down with some of the world's true change makers to give you all the tips, tools, and strategies to win the day every day. The quote for this episode comes from Winston Churchill and says, "If you're going through hell, keep going. If you're going through hell, keep going." Our guest today is Ollie Ollerton, a UK Special Forces operative, a 4-time best-selling author and star of the hit television series SAS Who Dares Wins and SAS Australia. Ollie's military career began at the age of 18 when he joined the Royal Marine Commandos and toured operationally in Northern Ireland and Iraq. After 5 years as a commando, Ollie was recommended for SAS Special Forces selection. Only 5 of the 250 candidates made it through the grueling 6-month selection process. Ollie then spent 6 years in the Special Boat Service, the SBS, where he undertook high-profile missions in counter-narcotics, counter-terrorism, homeland security, and humanitarian work. After leaving the Special Forces, Ollie held roles as a private security contractor in Iraq, project manager for major infrastructure projects in the Middle East, where he also trained a 2,000-strong Iraqi guard force, and as a bodyguard instructor for private projects and government officials. In addition, Ollie infiltrated child sex trafficking rings in Southeast Asia. Today, he is the founder of Breakpoint, where he provides leadership and development courses to the corporate and public sector that leverages the Special Forces mindset. Ollie is also the author of 4 best-selling books and founder of supplement brand Battle Ready Fuel. In this episode, we'll talk with Ollie about how he made it through the most grueling Special Forces training in the world, not once, but twice, the most impactful moments from his Special Forces career, his best tips and exercises for you to apply in civilian life, and how you can turn your breaking point into your biggest strength. Before we begin, remember that the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. So if there's a friend or loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day, share it with them right now. You've heard of 007. Today, we get to meet the real 00. Let's win the day with Ollie Ollerton. Well, Ollie, so great to see you, my friend. Thanks for coming on the Win the Day show.
Oh, mate, it's an absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this day for a long time, and I am winning the day by doing this.
We really appreciate you coming on. You're doing so many things at the moment, which I'm really excited to get into, and obviously more of your backstory too. To kick things off, what is the mission that you're on today that you're most excited about?
My mission is the same mission as every day, really, James, and that is how can I benefit the wider audience? You know, my mission, if I had to define it, which is the mission that's on the wall as you walk in this office, is to create a globally identified brand recognized for the positive growth and development of others. At the end of the day, you know, we are a business that is dedicated in the service of others, which I think is such a powerful thing to wake up and feel that you're doing every day. And I'm pretty sure it's a similar kind of ethos for you.
Huge. You know, in your books, you talk about the importance of the standards that you're around and the people who bring positive and inspiration. Like it's such a big motivating force, just as when you're around people who don't deliver that, it can be extremely debilitating. And you know, you mentioned so many of the things in your books of maybe decisions that you made that you wouldn't have made if you're around other high achievers and big dreamers and things. And that's what I love about the impact that you're having today.
Yeah, you know what? I actually think about this a lot. You know, you've got to be so mindful of the people that you surround yourself with. And I thought about this today. If you look around you, look at the people that are around you. I think you should not, obviously, it shouldn't be about envy. It shouldn't be about jealousy, but you should look around at people that you surround yourself with, and you should admire the qualities that they possess. You should look at them and think, I really respect that quality that person has. Because if you can't come up with anything in the people around you, then they shouldn't be around you.
Yeah, huge, absolutely huge. Ollie, you've had so many crazy experiences in this one life that you've got that's still, you know, maybe only about halfway through. What is the most vivid memory that you've got from your childhood, and how did that shape the man you are today?
You know, I talk about this a lot, and, you know, I'm sure there's people out there that listen to probably every one of my podcasts and think, bloody hell, Give me another story. But, it's the one thing, it's my first memory of my entry to this planet. And that is, the chimp story. And I was 10 years old. We went down, we were going swimming actually in my hometown. I was 10 years old and we stumbled across the circus. They were just setting up. And I found myself in a very sort of private little area that I shouldn't have been in. And where I came across a baby chimp. And, I was absolutely in love with the program Tarzan at the time. So for me, seeing that baby chimp, it was like a little piece of Hollywood. And, I was compelled. I went towards the animal. We started to engage. It was brilliant. It was like this unbelievable moment of this connection between man and beast. And when I say that, I mean, I wasn't much bigger really. I was 10 years old, but it was more like two chimps communicating. And then this chimp started to feed me. It was passing me food. I wasn't eating it. I was pretending to eat it. And then all of a sudden there was a scream that I'll never forget as, mummy or daddy saw what was going on, saw me as an immediate threat and came on the warpath. The blue sky turned to black very quickly as this thing pounced through the air and landed on my chest, pinned me to the floor and started absolutely going crazy. Its first fist came down, knocked everything I had out of me. I didn't think I had any more. And then it was fist after fist. It was like a drummer in a rock band, which I think is a great description of what was going on, but a big hairy one. And then blood started flying around. The thing was starting to bite me. And, my life flashed in front of me. It didn't take long because I was 10, very quick. In that moment, I managed to summon enough courage to do something about it. And, managed to get my knee up to my chest and kick the chimp as hard as possible, went to the floor, gave me a few seconds to get out of there. The chimp got to its feet. It was angrier than ever this time. And it came at me at Mach 20. And I just lay there waiting for what was going to happen. And, just before it got to me, it was an inch away. The chain caught it around the neck and didn't get to me. And that for me is, really helps me to define what breakpoint is. This was my first breakpoint. It wouldn't be my last, but breakpoint is when you take that short-term step into discomfort for long-term gain. Short-term discomfort was me at 10 years old, fighting a 50-kilogram chimp. I didn't get a chance to weigh it, by the way, but it felt heavy. And the long-term gain of that is the fact I'm here to tell the story. But that was really a defining moment. It was really an experience that would really affect my life moving forward, and it had a very, I'm not just going to say totally detrimental effect on my life, negative effect on my life, because there's a lot of questions I ask about that. Like if I didn't get attacked by the chimp, this is a great question. Do you think I'd have made it through the special forces? The selection, I don't know the answer to that, you know what I mean? But if you're looking at any kind of positives, it gave me some kind of burning desire for survival, I guess.
Do you think about it in terms of a metaphor of how just crazy things in life, like crazy negative things, trauma, we've had people on the show have been hit by trucks while they're out riding bikes, all these different things, how life can just completely derail you in the worst way at the craziest possible time?
Yeah, no, 100%, and I think at the end of the day as well, you should really not, every experience that we have in life, you shouldn't brush it away. You shouldn't try and forget it. You should try and think of what you've taken from that experience. For me, I look back on that experience and people, it gave me a lot of trauma, but the things I took from it, it sounds weird, but I'm almost grateful for getting attacked by the chimp that day. It's although on that day I wasn't feeling that way, but looking back in hindsight, it's like hindsight's a wonderful thing. It never won any wars, but it's great for reflection. And these experiences, I've had a lot of my most negative experiences are where I've grown the most.
You mentioned in your book the urge to live, that moment in particular gave you the urge to live for the first time. How can people develop that urge to live without having to go through a potentially life or death situation?
Yeah, you don't need to go and find a circus. You don't need to find a chimp to beckon an attack. But really, I think at the end of the day, you have got to understand that I think people are so confined through society, so confined in their belief systems, so confined in respect of their limiting beliefs. And it's really starting to understand that we are infinite. We are absolutely infinite. And sometimes it takes a very traumatic event for you to start to understand that. But, that regardless of the traumatic event being there or not, that doesn't change you. It doesn't make you a Superman or a superwoman, a traumatic event. It makes you just realize that it gives you a zest for life. It's almost like that brush so close to death made me want to embrace life 100% more. And it's a tough question because, it's like a lot of the stuff we do as a company is Breakpoint. It's really starting to teach people, we use a special forces kind of format, but we're not trying to train people to be special forces soldiers. At the end of the day, when we were out on operations and doing things, there was a lot at stake. People could die. It's hard to replicate that kind of feeling, that sense of, it's very hard to replicate that. So trying to push that across to people about really, engaging the fact about how important it is to have goals, how important it is to have a mission statement and all that kind of thing. I think the fact of the matter is we're only here once. We've got to make the most of it. Well, apparently here once. We've got to make the most of it. We've got to do what we can in this short amount of time because time is running out. We're all going in the same direction.
Yeah, the stakes are high. This is your life. You got one life. Yeah, get it done.
Yeah, get it done. Get it done.
At the age of 18, you joined the Royal Marine Commandos, and after 5 years, you were then selected for Special Forces selection. How would you describe which you went through twice? How would you describe the other candidates who were with you for the Special Forces training?
Yeah, very intimidating. I looked around and I looked at them and I felt like a boy in a man's world. Immediately self-doubt, lack of confidence, looking at them and how they looked and how I perceived them made me feel extremely weak. And I just thought, at that time, I can remember I got off the bus to start the first climb of the mountain, which was the start of a 6-month process, which essentially is 9 with continuation training. And, I can remember like getting off the bus and thinking, no, you're making a mistake. This is not, you are setting yourself up for failure by being here. And there was a little voice in my head at that point that just said, Ollie, just do today. Just do today. So I did just today. And I think it was actually, when I look at, we talk about ego. And sometimes I think, well, why is the bloody ego invented? No one's got a good word to say about it. But at that point for me, it was ego that kept me from getting back on the bus. I preferred to have failed on the mountain when no one was looking instead of having 280 people see me just get back on the bus. So that was a good thing. Ego stopped me from doing that. Just do today. The day went really well for me. I came back off the mountain in the top 5. A lot of people went home. And that's how I did that course, James. I did every day, just do today. When it went to the interrogation phase at the end, which was absolutely horrible, it was just do this second. I think that's a really important message for a lot of people. When your goals, which should scare you but excite you at the same time, nothing was ever great unless at some point you doubted your ability to achieve it. When the pressure's on, that goal starts to dissolve, because your brain can't see the path to the goal, it disregards it can be done, or it starts to reject the fact it can be done. And in those moments, just do today, just do the next second, just do the next hour, but keep moving forward. Don't stay still, because like water, you'll become stagnant.
It's such an important point. When I write Think and Grow Rich, a Legacy, and a lot of people reach out to me and they say, how can I, you've written a lot of books. How do I, as you have too, how can I go and write a book? And it seems like such an insurmountable goal. But just focusing on your version of like, just do today. For me, when I wrote Think and Grow Rich, a Legacy, was just do the best interview I can, which I would then tell in Think and Grow Rich, a Legacy. Or if it was a day of preparation, just do today by doing the preparation. And eventually all of those days that you have, which really comes into the win the day mentality as well, all of those things add up over time, like a compound interest graph. You start to get exponential rewards the longer you're consistent with just doing today.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, and at that point, going back to that point, at that moment of pressure, looking around me, 283, I didn't count them. There was loads of people, a lot of people wanting the same as me. My thoughts, if I focus then on that really big, ambitious goal of being one of the few percent, after that group, 5 would pass, I'd be one of them. But for me to think that at that moment became so unrealistic. So don't think about it. Think about your momentum, you moving forward in that very moment. And that's all you've got to do. And, as soon as I got onto that mountain, those people I started passing straight away. That was milestones of growth. Every person was a milestone of growth. Just get that momentum, just move forward. And one thing we say as well, which I think is really great, which is something we took from the special forces and sort of put it into this, but 1 meter square. When all around you is falling apart or becoming overwhelming, bring everything back to 1 meter square, focus on your immediate environment, keep the momentum moving forward, triage that situation. And, one thing I say about, look at the things you can't control and just focus on the things you can, because they're the only things that matter in that moment.
Yeah, it's so true. In Special Forces training, it looks like it's a real mental and physical battle to find out the people who want it the most. At what stage do they go away from that mental and physical test to actually teaching you training and practical skills that you can take into combat?
Your first phase is the heels phase, which is really a real grunt, true grit, determination, a lot of physical ability. I never, when people say, I had these questions quite often saying, what percentage is mental? What percentage is physical? I don't see it like that. I can't do this without this. You know what I mean? Everything starts here, everything. But it's so important to understand that the brain gives up way before the body. It's a self-preservation system. And once you understand that, you've got a lot more potential. Anyway, going back onto that question is the fact that initially that phase is to weed out those people who really haven't got that sort of mental robustness to get through that real grunt stage. So that's 2 weeks on the mountains. Anyone that passes that, you lose a lot of people on that. You lose probably, I'd say 60% of the course on those 2 weeks. And then should you be successful from that, you then go away to the jungle for 6 weeks. 4 weeks of that, you're fully immersed for 28 days right in the jungle. Your flesh starts to rot. You get trench foot. The only luxury you really have is a toothbrush. And then you have all your fighting kit, your weapon and everything else. The jungle is trying to kill you. The directing staff are trying to kill you. It's such a battle. And I think it's such an amazing environment to test the skills of a soldier, because before you can even start to think about the tactics of soldiering, you have to make sure that your personal admin, whether that's yourself or your kit, like your weapon and everything else, you have to take care of that before you even think about soldiering. And it's a brilliant environment to test that, test that sort of self-admin, if you want to call it that. Once you pass the jungle, you are pretty much, they kind of know that there's a 80% chance of you passing that course. And at that point, they start to invest in you as a person. At that point, they start to train you in skills, preparing you to fit into your team. I always say this, that Special Forces selection doesn't train you to be a Special Forces soldier per se. It more or less trains you to be able to fit into your team, to then start the real training as a Special Forces operator. So yeah, that point, the jungle phase, you've then started doing all your sort of your building assault skills, helicopter skills, demolition skills, radio communication, or Morse code, everything, medical, the whole lot. And then the last phase, which is the hardest phase of all, I thought, which was the escape and evasion. And that is the final test of a man's mental robustness, I suppose. You can't predict anything because you don't know what's going on in here at the end of the day until that very point where, 36 hours of I'm not going to call it torture. It's mental torture. It's not physical torture as such, but it is the hardest thing because, and people say, oh, well, it's just, it's not real. but there's a lot at stake. And when you've had that sleep deprivation, you can say one wrong word and everything you've trained up to that point is just gone. They can say no at that point.
It looks like a lot of crazy individuals, crazy in terms of people who don't fit in different things in the traditional sense. They're trying to nurture that individual creativity, and then they bring them back into thriving in a team environment. Is it challenging to take an individual who has all of these different things, these characteristics that don't help them fit in a traditional sense, to then mold them into being an essential part of a small team?
Yeah, you know what? This is a really good question, James, because I actually spend a lot of time thinking about this, because a lot of times I get called to corporate events and everything else. They want to talk, leadership. It's always leadership. And I'm like, first of all, leadership for me is about leadership of self. There's plenty of people out there in leadership roles that can't even lead themselves, and that's where it should start. I've always said this, that I truly believe that special forces operators are more like a group of leaders that adapt to working as a team, as opposed to a load of team players that one of them steps outside of that to be the team leader. It really is the fact we are a group of leaders, and you've only got to look at lads that lead the special forces. We're very much we're very much the lone survivor kind of mentality when we leave. We go on our own path. So I was also very much spoiled. When it comes to leadership, I was spoiled because I worked with a highly trained group of leaders. You know what I mean? It was like it was more a group of leaders than it was a team that, there was one individual that was responsible for that team. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, yeah, it's essential that you get that person. I call it, they're not just leaders, they're pioneers, that are prepared to carve their own path and not follow someone else's footprints. And that very much, when you look at the special forces, when they came to fruition back in the, World War I, etc., they were laughed out of Whitechapel when the concept of them came to, when it was introduced. And really, when I look at that, it's like, why were they so successful with limited resources and assets, but caused so much more damage? And that's really because they were given the autonomy and the responsibility to get the job done at any cost. They didn't have to seek a higher command to take the shot. You know what I mean? And that's what made them so different than everyone else. So a group of pioneers put together, a group of leaders put together with the get the job done, whatever attitude. Obviously, enough rope to hang yourself. But, at the end of the day, it was the fact that we don't have to seek a higher command to get the job done. We take the shot. And, when you look at the corporate relevance of that, there's a lot of people in corporate structures that haven't got that autonomy. They're scared to take the shot. They don't, and then before you know it, they've missed the opportunity because they've got to make a phone call before they can make a decision. So that's one of the things we really put across in a lot of our leadership training, that you have to give people the autonomy and responsibility to be able to take the shot.
Huge, absolutely huge. How did you went on to then join the special boat service, the SBS? How did you feel ahead of your first operation as part of the SBS compared to your first one as part of the Royal Marine Commandos?
Yeah, what a different world. It was such a different world. And it was, it's everything I dreamed of. When I was 10, when I got attacked by the chimp, that was the same year that they stormed the Iranian Embassy in London. So it's a big year for me, 1980. The significance of that attack, which the whole world saw on TV. And I feel that was the one thing that really captured me as a kid. Seeing that planted a seed so deep within my subconscious. And then my first operation with the SBS was exactly the same, not exactly the same operation, but it was exactly, that look, the balaclavas, the black kit, the small submachine guns. It was that moment. You know what I mean? It was like almost like everything. I joined the Royal Marines for that feeling, that experience, that sense of that brotherhood. I didn't get that. I didn't get it there. So that's why I went for Special Forces selection. But all of a sudden, I can remember that day when we were going out of camp, going home. We had pagers, and all of a sudden the pager went off. Now, a lot of times they would just do a check on, to make sure there was a comms check, everyone check in. But this time the code came up, which meant this is a real one. And it was just like, whoa, it's happening, it's happening. A lot of times we used to go off and you'd sit out in a forward operating base for weeks, sometimes out at sea on a ship, waiting for the job to go down. But this job went in straight away. We were flown to a forward operating base. The job went down that night. It happened all overnight. We were back lifting the boats out of the water as the sun came up the next morning. It was just phenomenal. And that was like the difference, that felt like the difference. Wow.
And the Iranian Embassy incident that you mentioned before, that was like the very first time that the SAS had been seen in public, wasn't it? And even publicly acknowledged?
Yeah, no, 100%. And Margaret Thatcher was in power at the time, and she wanted to send a message to the world that not to mess with our assets and not to mess with our special forces. Usually what you do on those situations, you will blanket the whole front off so that the media can't see anything, they can't film anything. But Margaret Thatcher wanted to show the world what we had, and what a significant attack that was, what a significant rescue that was, which is still talked about and renowned all over the world.
The SBS motto, not by strength, by guile, how would that be revealed in a practical sense during missions?
At the end of the day, it's not just by strength, it's by skill, isn't it? And tactics and everything else. So really what that displays for me is really, it's about this up here. This is the best weapon you've got. And really that, the thinking soldier, it's not just about grunt and blood, sweat and tears. It's about how we can use this. So that really, not by strength, by guile, really sort of displays that sort of mental strength and, the thinking soldier.
So rather than like the level playing field, it's what can you do to win with just, the most efficient way possible.
Yeah, it's that having, thinking outside of the box, doing things, being dynamic, totally dynamic, and not being so addicted to structure that when it falls down, you fall down. It's and that is something that, if there's anything I took from the Special Forces, there's a couple of things. First of all, it was the power of process. And secondly, it was the ability to understand that no plan survives first contact. Mike Tyson said that a little bit more, they'll probably explain it a bit better. And that's, everyone has a plan to look at a punch face. You know what I mean? And it's just, and we, again, when it comes to the corporate world, it's like, that's another thing we teach. No plan survives first contact. Remain totally dynamic and understand that any sort of progress towards a goal is never linear.
People in America, they hear a lot about Navy SEALs, Delta Force, but a lot of these, they're all based, I believe, on the SAS and the SBS. It was really the British Special Forces that created all of these other Special Forces units around the world in a modern sense. What is the skill set of the SAS and the SBS? How capable are they on the battlefield, and how devastating would that be against just a regular force?
Yeah, you know what? We always laugh at this. Obviously, everyone wants to say that they're and I don't sit there arguing. At the end of the day, I'm a little bit biased because I was part of the best special forces military in the whole world. But really, one thing, why are the UK Special Forces so good? First of all, we have the heritage, the knowledge, the heritage to back that. Secondly, I know this is a bit of a funny one. Comes down to money, mate. At the end of the day, we haven't got the money, so we have to be. It's all about being the master of all, the jack of all trades, master of none. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, you got the Americans have got so much money, they've got someone to hold the weapon, and they'll bring in a number two to pull the trigger.
It's like the NFL. So really, you got the offense, you got the defense, you got the special teams.
Exactly, mate. Exactly. So really, at the end of the day, also, the harshness of the environment that we train in, which really, at the end of the day, that builds that mental robustness, that resilience. So, we train in so many different theaters of combat, whether that's in the desert, in the Arctic, the jungle, everything. So really for us, again, it's all about being the jack of all trade, master of none. So we have to be that sort of universal soldier. The amount of skills and the amount of weapon systems and everything else you have to have the knowledge on, it just makes you a lot more, it gives you a lot more bandwidth as a Special Forces soldier.
You mentioned earlier when you were in Special Forces training how apprehensive you were and that feeling of wanting to get on the bus. What was the moment when you recognized that, yes, I belong, yes, I'm elite?
Yeah, you know what? Well, really, for me, it was, at the end of the day, it was like going through that selection course was such a massive step in my development as an individual. Because at the end of the day, first of all, when I kind of, when I was thinking about leaving the military, going to be a civilian, or go to special forces, it was actually my officer that was he was the one that made me make that decision. And it was through his belief in me. He had more belief in me than I had in myself. And if it wasn't for I almost did selection because I felt I had a duty to honor his confidence in me. But really up until that point, I thought, I went to Northern Ireland with him. I went to Operation Desert Storm in Iraq with him. And I actually thought he didn't value me as a soldier at all. And then I randomly bumped into him, sometime later down the track. And I told him, look, I'm leaving. And he was like, no way. He said, please don't do that because I believe you got the skills or the aptitude to be a special forces soldier. And you'll regret that for the rest of your life if you don't do it. So really that for me was like, I was like, wow, I borrowed confidence off that man. And that's why it's so important, if you are a leader, the effect you can have on the people around you that look up to you, any kind of those words of confidence have such a deep and meaningful effect on any individual. And it certainly did on me. But really then pushing forward for special forces selection, that growth that I felt through that course, all my life, I'd given myself a hard time. You know what I mean? It's like all my life, I'd self-doubt, self-criticism, and that's never gone away. You know what I mean? But, it's different levels of self-criticism and belief. But really for me, when I got to the end of that course, I was like, wow, I'm like one of 5 out of that 280, whatever the number was on that day. I must have something.
Yeah, it's such a big one. And that then a lot of the special forces people that I've spoken to have mentioned that there is that camaraderie between the different units. Obviously, of course, a lot of banter and friendly banter and all those types of things. Did you notice any common traits between the Delta operators, the SEALs, the British Special Forces, like the Aussies? Like, what were the common traits between the most elite soldiers from all around the world?
Yeah, I mean, listen, and especially as a special forces soldier, we work with units all over the world. At the end of the day, there's no easy special forces selection. It's fact that, there's never going to be an easy, I'll go to them because that one's an easy one. They're all meant to be hard because the environment they're training you for. Now, pretty much it's not the same for every special forces unit, but, and certainly as a contractor as well, I spent a long time as a military contractor working with a lot of former special forces from all over the world. There's almost like this, there's this sense of belief in someone else's abilities once they've done a special forces selection. Now, how that sort of plays out when you're working together is that person has a strong strength of belief in their own abilities. They're the kind of person that will get the job done, whatever. They've got that can-do attitude. You're dealing with someone highly motivated, highly driven, and really that is for anyone who's done any kind of credible special forces selection process. So there's a certain set of skills, as Liam Neeson once said, that I have
a very particular set of skills.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's your character. It's the character. Forget these skills on a weapon system or whatever. It's your skills as a person, your ability as a person, and knowing that whoever's done especially that we got a lot of time for the Delta lads because we feel the Delta lads are more like the SBS than the Navy SEALs. But really, it's understanding that it's that character of person. You can rely on that person 100%.
You often talk about breathe, recalibrate, deliver through the work that you do. Can you share an example of how someone could use that in a civilian setting?
Yeah, you know what? And that came from me breaking down what we go through when we're in, I questioned a very good mate of mine, one of my best mates, Foxy, who's also a former SBS operator. He's on the TV show. We sat down and we said, how did we manage throughout that time of absolute mayhem, how do we manage to step outside of that mayhem, slow everything down to our speed so that that we were in control? We put ourselves in the driving seat. What did we do? What was happening? So really, let's look at what happens when you get into a very stressful situation. You don't even know you're doing it, but your breathing starts to become very erratic. What happens then? Cortisol levels start to increase. Our brains can only handle 5 to 9 bits of information at any one time. When we're stressed, that goes down to 1, maximum 2. The only way you can alleviate that confusion through the rise of that cortisol is by breathing. And really about in that situation, because any kind of situation, when it starts going fast, and that's not just in the special forces environment, when things start to go wrong, that could be a road, a traffic incident, or even an argument. It ramps up very quickly. Now, you can't allow yourself to get pulled along at that speed, because the situation will grab you around the neck and it will rag you around like a little doll. So basically what you have to do in that moment, and it sounds like a long process, but it doesn't have to be. If you know you're going into a situation, you've got to control the cortisol. And the only way you can do that is by breathing. They teach it in yoga. People that do yoga will understand that, but that box breathing, breathe in for 3 to 5 seconds, hold for 3 to 5, out for 3 to 5 seconds, hold for 3 to 5, and control your pattern of breathing. That lowers the cortisol. And at that moment, that's what we call recalibration. Recalibration is really about letting go of all the things that don't matter in that moment and focusing on the 1 to 2 things that do. And once you're in that emotional state, you then deliver the action. Because if you don't control your faculties, you will move. Your brain is just wired to go, get me out of here, whatever it takes. It will take the shortcut just to get out of that situation. 9 times out of 10, you are stepping into further danger or putting yourself, taking actions or making decisions that you're going to regret afterwards.
Yeah, you can
so
see
just that simple process.
Yeah, you can see that in scuba diving, isn't it? When it's like you don't you suck in like twice as much oxygen if you're feeling anxious?
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. It's the same when you're above the surface. The thing is, a lot of the time, people actually walking around. I know, this is again something that we teach a lot to our audience, and that's the fact that this isn't just about being a special forces soldier and being shot at. This is about everything in your life. If you know you're going into a situation that is going to be stressful, it could be a negotiation, it could be speaking to your boss about a pay rise, it could be whatever it is. Control your breathing before you go in. Because if you go with that heightened sense of emotion, which is basically your fight or flight response, you're not going to make the right decision or take the right action. Also, if you're, suddenly find yourself in that situation, the first thing you should do is take a breath before you take action. It can happen really quickly. But yeah, breathe, recalibrate, deliver the action. And 9 times out of 10, you'll make a decision that's based on clarity and not confusion.
Which can have a very big difference to sending an email that could ruin your career or relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. We've all been in that situation, whether it's road rage, whether it's an argument with your partner, whether it's something, how you've reacted to your kids. We all do it. And then afterwards you go away going, why did I say that? Your face goes red. You feel like an idiot. You can avoid that from happening. It's easier said than done. But if you can make that conscious effort not to react in that moment, take a knee in the heat of battle and just go through that process very quickly, it makes all the difference. And listen, I'm not perfect. I still react. I still get flared up in the car and stuff like that. But I'm extremely conscious of when that does happen.
Yeah, the quicker you can take that breath, the quicker you can get the situation back on track.
100%. 100%.
Are there any things that you do instinctively from all your special forces training in life today?
Process. I understand how important process is. When I get up, I have a very strict, regimented, if you even want to call it that, routine. And my best day, it's the best version or the best day. And I say my best day because every day is not like this. But I aim to do this every day, and that's get up very early. In the summer, that can be as early as 4:30 in the morning. I get out of bed, I go downstairs, I go into my sauna. I've got an infrared sauna. I sit in there. I use my YouTube for a guided meditation around about 20 minutes. I'll then come out of there. I'll then go and get the dog, go for a run. I'll put some clothes on first, by the way. And then, and then by the time I've got back to my home office, which is the only time I will turn my phone on, I'll take it off flight mode. I then can do probably an hour's work that would take me 2 hours to do later on during that day. Now, the reason I've detailed that is because I don't want to do that. At the end of the day, people think, oh, it's because you're an ex-special forces soldier, you can do that. That's absolute rubbish, because I bleed and breathe just like everyone. I have the same things going on up here as everyone does. Oh, you've worked hard enough. Let's start on a Monday. Blah, 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 this, that, and the other. Oh, you tired, all these range of things, because your brain is wired to take that creative procrastination. It will try, your brain says, go check your phone, check your email. It's looking to try and steer you in a path that's going to avoid the unknown stress that's about to happen. And that for me is the point I'm getting to, is process is what gets me through that. Process, I've got to switch off the emotional messages going on in here and just follow process. I know at that point I wake up, I don't need an alarm clock anymore, because I'm so used to getting up at that time. So I wake up, I know straight away I've got to get out of bed, and that's a process. Get out of bed, get up, go downstairs, do the sauna, this, that, and the other. Especially in the winter after the sauna, what do you think my head's saying? Stay in, the radiators just come on, the coffee machine is there, the bean to cup coffee machine, you worked hard yesterday, why don't you go for a run tomorrow? All this stuff. But no, you follow the process, put your trainers on, get the dog, take a step outside. As soon as you close that door, everything changes. Now, if I have a bad day after that routine, I've won every day. I don't care how bad the day is. But if I've allowed my brain to combat me or dominate over me, and I have a bad day, that day is something I prefer to forget. And you should never want to forget any days. Well, some days you've got no choice on that. But, so really for me, it's about process. Process is so powerful. Don't expect to be motivated. It comes and goes. I don't care if you're an astronaut, special forces soldier, gold medalist. Motivation comes and goes. It's not there all the time. And that's where process really is important. From A to B to C to D, follow that process and you'll get there.
What if you're out of your environment? Say you're hopping on a flight to Australia to go and film an episode of your epic show, SAS Australia. You've had 0 sleep on the plane. You're in a hotel room. Maybe there's construction next door. You've had no sleep and you've got to rock up on and deliver on camera. All this pressure and everything's riding on you. Have you got something that you do to make sure you can get in the zone and deliver the best in that moment?
Mate, that sounds very familiar. Sounds very familiar indeed.
What you signed up for with your TV career.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I've been in that situation time and time again. But the thing is, at the end of the day, if I can't do, I've also got to I've got to be careful. I understand how my body works. And I understand when I'm feeling tired. I understand when my mind's pretending that I'm tired to try and avoid something. And I think understanding how I'm wired, understanding exactly what's going on, very in touch with who I am, I think that helps me to understand the days when I do need to take a rest. Like for me, again, getting up in the morning, right? I don't set the alarm. So if I sleep till 6, my body needs it. You know what I mean? And that's where the way I run things. If I'm going overseas, I can't get that workout in, I can't do my routine. I don't give myself a hard time. A lot of the weekends, I don't do that routine. I give myself a break. I have a lie-in. That's never really a lie-in as such. 6:30 is a lie-in. But really, it's just understanding that, I adapt. A lot of times I can't, like in the morning, for instance, not tomorrow morning, but, this week, I couldn't do my routine on Monday because I had to be on a train early down to London. But, I just understand that will be a day that I have to put stuff to one side. But at least I've got a good reason to do that, So, at the end of the day, you can't give yourself a hard time when you don't do it, as long as you've got a valid excuse. And it's not just your mind doing that creative procrastination that it loves to do.
For sure. We got some questions now from the Win the Day community. And if you want to find out what guests we have coming up on the Win the Day podcast, and if you would like to ask them some questions of your own, go and join the Win the Day group on Facebook. The very first question comes from Nathan in Sydney. How do you help people get really honest about what their personal mission is and what their true goals are?
There is a process around that. It's really important that you've got to start to understand that, a goal has to be extremely selfish. A goal is not about how it looks to the outside world. You have to be passionate about that, because if you're not passionate about it, you're never going to achieve it. So really, I think the first thing to do with anyone that really wants to evolve in life is they have to be 100% honest with where they are right now. At the end of the day, it's like putting you want to go somewhere with your GPS. If you don't know where you are right now, you're never going to find your destination. So it's 100% being totally honest with where you are, where you're at right now. And I'd like to make a point of saying that at the moment, I am getting so tired of people that are not authentic. You see it everywhere. Everyone is faking perfection, especially on Egogram, which I call it. Everyone's faking perfection. No one is actually being, well, I wouldn't say no one. There's a lot of people out there painting this picture of perfection, and it's such a lie. It's such a lie. Be absolutely honest with yourself. Write down all your weaknesses, because if you can't expose your weaknesses, you can't do anything about them. So to really, it's like when I went through some mental health issues, I came back and basically I wanted to start this company called Breakpoint. Breakpoint is all about helping other people. I was broken at the time I came up with that. Now, how can I help other people if I'm broken? If I didn't expose all of my weaknesses and do something about that, there's no way I could have achieved what I wanted to achieve. So really, it's about being 100% honest with yourself. And then really, when it comes to your goals, once you've defined that, started to address your weaknesses, that could be alcohol, it could be drug, whatever it is. Once you've addressed that and got yourself to a place where that is no longer evident, that is a much better standing point to state your goals. You've got a much better foundation for that.
And I want to acknowledge you for a moment, my friend, with just how honest and vulnerable and upfront you are with your books. If you haven't gone and grabbed a copy of Ollie's books, Breakpoint as well, Battle Ready, these are amazing books. It comes across so well. You did an incredible job with those books. So if you've had the strength and vulnerability to do it, I think that gives a lot of hope to a lot of other people. So well done on that. We have Tim in Gladstone who asked, is it true, this is an interesting question, is it true people in the SAS and SBS inflict pain on each other to keep from getting bored and to keep on edge?
I love that question. I think possibly, look, I'll look for an element of truth in that, and probably mental torture, yeah. You know what I mean? And it's always from a joking kind of nature, but, we just like a load of kids all together, jokes on each other and practical jokes and everything else. So that's probably the only element. But you don't sit there and start, a hot poker in the eye kind of thing just because you're bored. No, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
Brad in Vancouver asked, how do you process some of the atrocities you went through in war? Do you have to replay them with a different mindset to come to terms with it?
It's another great question, but I think you've got to understand that, you've got to take yourself out of that equation and not allow yourself to be the victim of the situation. You've got to understand your power has to be the purpose of what you're doing. It's like, when I went across to Southeast Asia, child prostitution and slavery. I'd just come back from the UK of reuniting with my son. I've not seen him for 8 years before I did that. Seeing my son then, it was like amazing to see him. Then I went over to Southeast Asia, saw kids my son's age that were being sold into a life of child prostitution and slavery. Now, I could have looked at that and gone, and all kinds of mental trauma and everything, that could have related to that. But really, when I then focused on them as opposed to me, and how my actions were helping to change the destiny of their lives, that became a lot more powerful than the atrocities that I was witnessing. You know what I mean? So it took me out of being the victim and knowing that everything that I was doing was for the greater good of helping them. So define your power away from yourself and don't allow yourself to be subject to being the victim.
Love it. Mary in Canada asked, would you recommend your own children follow in your footsteps?
No, I would not. And the reason being is because we were all put on this planet to find our own path in life. At the end of the day, if my son said to me one day, look, I'm joining the military, I'd support him 100%, but I wouldn't shoehorn him into it. We're all here to find our own path in life. And I think we can support, but I wouldn't want to start shoehorning, and start saying this is what you should do. I know my son wouldn't do that anyways. Actually, my son's just turned up about 4 weeks ago and now lives with me for the first time ever. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing. But yeah, no, he's different. And at the end of the day, I just like to say as well, I have a lot of different views nowadays about war itself. I look at the validity of some of these conflicts and some of these wars, and I don't have a lot of belief in the motive behind them. So I certainly wouldn't be pushing people to do the same.
Does the validity come from the costs of war?
The costs and also the motives. The motive at the end of the day then further amplify the cost, because I know a lot of people that come back with missing limbs and a lot of some people, obviously not all scars are evident, but really the meaning behind the reason to go to war, and that's very apparent in this world today, the world we experience on a daily basis as well. I think they're making this, they're writing paychecks for other people's lives, and I think it's a terrible thing.
Oh, the agendas and invisible strings on everything. It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I think this is good timing for the next question. Karen in Ireland asked, as a soldier, did you ever put yourself in the other side's shoes where you feel empathy, sadness, or even not want to fight?
Yeah, 100%. But I wouldn't say, at the end of the day, I always did that. I can remember when I went to my first war, they call it a conflict, but if someone's trying to kill you, I call it a war. And that was in Northern Ireland, it's like, I always put myself in their shoes. And I thought very much like we were fighting the IRA out there. And I said it on a daily basis that if I was born in Ireland, I would probably be in the IRA. And I've always held that sort of thought. Whenever I go to any kind of war zone and have been anywhere, I always put myself in their shoes. It's like when I was in Iraq, I got attacked by the militia, and I thought, well, I'd probably be in the militia if I was, and I lived in, when I looked at that, I thought, the Americans moved in and everything else. I thought, how would I feel? How would I feel if that was my country? I want to rebel. I want to be, like the resistance or whatever. So yeah, 100%.
And final question from the Win the Day community. Brett in Brisbane asked, what's the hardest thing that you've experienced as an elite soldier?
As an elite soldier, I mean, really selection was the hardest thing as an elite soldier. One thing I'll say, look, I make no bones about this, is the fact that when I passed Special Forces selection, I expected to be at war every day. It's something that I wanted to be. That's where I wanted to be. That didn't happen for me. I wasn't around the times of the Iraq. When I was in Iraq, it was as a contractor. I'd left. I was a military contractor. So really, for me, and the reason for a lot of my frustration as a soldier is because I wasn't at war every day. There wasn't loads going on. I did the hardest thing for me, I tell you what, and I know it's going to be a bit deflating for someone asking that question, is the fact I could not handle life as a peacetime soldier. That was the most frustrating thing for me. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be at war every day and sitting there around on camp, training. That was the hardest thing for me. So sorry, it's not, there wasn't blood and guns and bullets in that answer, but that was it.
Well, let's switch gears now, because so much of your journey and the life that you're in now is inspired by that time after you left the military, and you did a lot of soul searching when you were in Australia and all of those different things before Breakpoint. The structure of Special Forces was a big part of your discipline and desire to maintain that excellence. Why is it that so many people who are in the Special Forces struggle to maintain that discipline and that strength when they leave?
I think they lose their sense of purpose. When you come out, it's almost like if you want to relate it to someone that's at the top of their game, like in football or any kind of sport, any kind of Olympic medalist or whatever, coming out of that and then all of a sudden seeing this massive void and struggling to find purpose. I didn't understand what that word meant when I was serving. I didn't understand it's nothing that ever came into my vocabulary, but I really did start to understand it afterwards. When I lost that sense of purpose, I came outside and I was like, I noticed, I think I had no discipline as such because I was drinking heavily. I knew the things I was doing wrong, but I was still doing them. But really, I lost that sense of purpose. That enthusiasm for life. I was bouncing around war zones looking for this external fix that I thought was going to make me happy. It took me a long time to realize that there is no external fix. And it was only when I was forced to look within that I realized the answers that's where the answers are all along.
Like the leadership
So
starts
really,
with you, like you mentioned earlier.
100%, it's like when I actually realize, it's none of it. We are so much output, and we rarely think about input, but I was forced into that. I was at my lowest ebb after 10 years after leaving, started thinking about suicide. I'd just gone overseas to do that thing with helping the kids, came back, that fell apart. And it was like my life just fell apart at that point. But that forced me to stop looking for the answers externally. And it forced me to look within. And it was, my greatest obstacle was my greatest discovery. And that obstacle was really, the fact that I was forced to look within. And looking within very quickly, the return on investment was absolutely unbelievable.
Mm. I'd love to zero in a little bit there on what you mentioned, some of those things there. Was there a particularly dark day that stands out where you were at your lowest point that you remember?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when I came back to Australia. I was living in Australia at the time. I stumbled across something overseas that I just thought it meant more to me than the military. It was that missing piece that had always been missing, and I just sat there thinking, wow, I felt I had the biggest sense of purpose I'd ever had. And, I just thought, this is me for the rest of my life. I found it. Wow. And I stumbled across it. And that was the power of helping people, especially less fortunate. I wasn't being paid for that. I was funding that myself. And then that all crumbling down and then ending up back in Australia, that as soon as I got back in a pretty short time after that, those days, there was a group of days that when I actually started thinking about suicide, that was the point where I went, whoa, what are you doing? I don't know if I'd ever attempted it. I never attempted it. But the fact I was there, that was a wake up call for me to go, and I heard that voice again, that little voice I heard again that said, Ollie, it does not end like this. I heard that. And hearing that voice was like, no, it doesn't. And that was at that point, that I then started to realize that the more we focus on anything, the bigger it gets. Now that can be positive, but if it's a negative thing, for me, hating my environment, hating myself, the more I did that, the bigger that was going to become. So really, it was about taking myself out of there, starting to visualize, starting to project of what I wanted to look like. Once I could visualize what that looked like, I then add emotion to that to then create what that feels like, which is so important. And it was that pulled me out of that darkness.
Yeah.
And that was, a lot of people, I want to make a point of this because I think it's really important. When it comes to mental health, I started to question myself, right? I was sat there going, I've got mates with legs that are blown off, this, that, and da, 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 da. I started to compare, why did I deserve to have mental health issues? I started to think there was some kind of criteria, some kind of checklist. The fact of the matter is, it's relative to you. We are our own barometer. Now, it's as simple as this. There's 7 days in a week. If you're feeling bad 5 out of 7, you need to do something about it. If you're feeling bad 4 out of 7, you need to do something about it. At the end of the day, we have bad days. But the fact of the matter is, we should be feeling good more so than not. And if we're not, the military don't own PTSD. You know what I mean? The military don't own mental health issues. You need to do something about it. And that's when, I then reverse that into the answer to our mental health is our mental wealth. The more we invest in ourselves, the better the return on investment.
How is PTSD handled in special forces? Like, do they assume because of your superior tactical training that you would be better equipped to handle something like PTSD?
Well, it's funny you should say that. Well, it's not funny, but I did hear a statistic recently that there is a lot less mental health issues and PTSD in the special forces than any other unit. But they still have their issues. But, you know, at the end of the day, a lot's changed since I joined. You know, I've been out a long time, James. You know, back in my day, you know, it's shut up, have a beer, and get on with it. You know, and I know that attitude, and the more we can do to change that, the better. You know, and I look back, I left with that mentality. You know, I look back now, and I was trying to be this. You know, I listen. I'm a big alpha male. I'm all for being alpha, but I came out with this sort of macho attitude that showing any kind of weakness is, or any kind of emotion is weak, and it should be hidden away. And I look back I look back on that now, and I think how weak I was for not being able to help myself, for not being able to take that help from other people that were there to support me. I look at that and then I think how weak I was for that. Mm. You know, so, but really, you know, if you sit there, you know, and that's how I thought. I'm sitting there thinking, I'm a former special forces soldier. I can't have mental health issues. Stop labeling yourself. You know, at the end of the day, it's simple. Are you feeling below par? More so than not. If you are, do something about it. And it's actually when I went to see a spiritual psychologist that everything started turning around for me. You know, they're the ones that reversed the lens and told me to look within. And that was life-changing.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about what happened during that encounter?
Yeah, no, I went, I was talking about this today, actually, James. It was actually in Brisbane. I was in Brisbane at the time, and I came back from Iraq, and it was like I started to question a lot, you know, looking back, thinking, wow, you know, this is not good. It's probably the first time I'd actually sat there and thought about that. I was drinking too much. You know, I was coming back from a war zone, and I do empathize with my partner at the time, Nat, who was a psychologist, thank God, because she saved me a fortune. But really, you know, it was like starting to think about how the people around me, how I'm affecting them. And it started to make me question myself a lot. And at that point, I knew by going to a doctor that they would slide me across a load of pills and they were not going to help. You know, I've had friends that have done that and then died shortly afterwards. So really, for me, it was like I wanted to seek something alternative to that option. And I don't know, I was just almost drawn to this person that wasn't far from me who was a psychologist, but in a more sort of holistic kind of way. So basically just that first session there, I went there and it was incredible, you know, and I sat there and for the first time when I did group meditations and, you know, that kind of stuff, I would have never have done under my own steam. But him pushing me into that, that was life-changing. That was unbelievable. Mm. So yeah, that was really the start of me starting to reflect and look inwards.
Mm. And in Battle Ready, you said you're happier than ever because you found your inner purpose and you followed it. Was that the process that you went through there, or was that something that happened a little bit later that just added a little bit more clarity to that sort of?
No, that's exactly that. As you just said, a bit more clarity, because later on down the track, you know, I was searching. You know, I look back and, you know, I've had a great life. It's been amazing, but I've always had that I'm not settled in my environment kind of feeling. I'm not at home here. Something's not right. I've always felt that. And the only time I have felt that is when I stumbled across, it was after that happened, after the psychologist, you know, the spiritual psychologist. It was then when I went to Southeast Asia, stumbled across that experience, which was, again, something that was devastating for me. But look at the silver lining I took from that. I understood the power of helping other people. And that was so powerful. That would then be the heartbeat and DNA of starting my company, Breakpoint. You know, it's something I'd never considered before, a life in service of others. And I think it's a really good way for a lot of people to reflect. If you're feeling a bit like you're in this monotonous routine, you know, life's a bit mundane, life's a bit flat, don't reflect on your job as just a means for paying your bills. Start to look at how your job is positively affecting the life of others. You know, and once you reflect on it like that, it gives you a greater sense of purpose than just paying for your car finance or for your kids' bills or whatever. You know, a lot of time people can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to change jobs, I'm going to do this and da, 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 da. They can't do that. But you can reframe. You know, it's a simple process to reframe exactly what you're doing. And that was a massive thing for me. I tell you what, the thing that changed my life, I came out of the military, money. Where can I earn money? Oh, go to Iraq as a contractor, earn loads of money. It was all money. Money was in the driving seat. I was money's bitch. You know what I mean? Alcohol. I was also alcohol's bitch. You know what I mean? And basically that was in the driving seat. When I learned so much from that operation in Thailand, because all of a sudden I had a greater passion that was far superior to the driving force for revenue. And the finances became the byproduct. And that is how I've lived ever. And that's why I'm the happiest I've ever been, because front and center is my passion and my mission for what I'm doing. And no longer is money. Because when you've got that attitude, right, money's in control, or anything, whether that's money, pornography, whether that's alcohol, whatever it is, you are never going to be satisfied. You know what I mean? With the money thing, once you get to that next goal, whatever it is, you want the next. It's never ending. You're never going to be happy. But when you've got that, when your passion is driven by something more powerful than that, your sense of purpose, which it is for me now, the money's a byproduct.
Such an important distinction. So well said. Through your TV shows and also your military career, you've trained so many people, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people. How quickly can you tell whether someone has what it takes to succeed, and what are the signs that you're looking for?
You can tell by their energy, by their commitment as well. I deal with a lot of people, and I was just talking about this again today. It's like, I do a lot of talks, a lot of times when I'm brought in by companies to help companies evolve. But there's never a greater audience than the audience that are totally invested in developing themselves. Do you know what I mean? It's like when you've got an audience that they are hungry for that content because they want to add that value to their own life. And when you can see that in a person, and you can see there, and you can feel that it's an energy exchange, as opposed to it's some environments I end up in doing my presentations and stuff. I feel like an energy bucket with a hole in it. It's just leaking out, pouring out, and the more you put in, it's just pouring out. But when I have an audience and people around me that you can feel that they are so invested in self-development, they're going to meet you halfway and some. It becomes like this energy circuit, as opposed to just your energy pouring out and going nowhere. It becomes this energy exchange, and that's amazing. You can feel it, you can sense it, and that is just amazing. But really, those people that want to invest in this, because I can say what I want. I can sit here talking till I'm blue in the face about stuff, but if someone's not invested in, taking on board what I'm saying, it's just it's going to have a limit, a very short limit as well.
And speaking of great energy, shout out to Laura, Danny, and Lisa and the Breakpoint team doing some amazing things. What are you working on now that's most excited about? You got Breakpoint, you got Battle Ready Fuel, you might have a few more books in the works, TV shows.
Yeah, we're looking to get everything online now. So no, that's a passion for me. We've got Denny and Lisa out here that, they're pushing sort of the event side of the business, so the front-facing side of the business, which is then giving us, me and Laura, the freedom to then branch away and start to really get the online program so we can really reach a much bigger audience. But that mission to create a globally identified brand recognized for the positive growth and development of others, the way we can do that is through our online and virtual programs. And then all of a sudden we find that we're moving. We've created this amazing space, but we've managed to find what we've been looking for a long time, and that is a property where we can co-locate the business and everything. So we've got the business there, the house, the whole lot. So that is our next project, to move into that, and I think that really is going to help us go to the next level. So but really cool. Just doing what we're doing on a bigger scale. That's the mission.
Yeah, it's so cool. You're changing a lot of lives. 2 more questions before we get into the Win the Day rocket round. I'm really curious your answer for this one. If you were dropped in a new country and all you had was a laptop and $100, how would you build your business all over again?
Wow. I think I'd sell naked pictures, but I probably wouldn't make
You'd be in a mansion in no time.
Yeah, no, exactly. Mate, that's a really good question. I have no idea, but $100, what was it, $100?
$100 and a laptop. Yeah. New country, you could speak the language.
I don't know. That's a tough one. I can't answer that question, but maybe I should think about that just in case it happens.
For sure. Well, I'm sure you would, I think, you're more well equipped than anyone else we've had on the show to be able to do that if it happened in real life. And final question before the rocket round. On your best day, what's an affirmation that you would write on a flashcard that you could show yourself on your worst day?
I am willing to accept change, as difficult as it may seem. I know it's taken me to bigger and better things.
So good.
You know what? That was the one affirmation when I was in Australia, and I knew something was changing. Everything was starting to fall apart. Pain screams the loudest when it's dying. It's the birth of something new. And I said that affirmation every day. And the more I said it, the more things started to change. And as I looked around me, I started to realize, as difficult as it may seem, it was falling apart, but it was the birth of something new. And really, I said that repeatedly. And honestly, it's true. When you want to change your life, look at it. I always relate to a relationship because everyone's been in one of those. Everyone's been in a toxic relationship, especially people my age anyway, at some point. And, at the end of the day, when things start to fall apart, it's because you can't fool the universe. You know what I mean? It's because your soul's not connected to that engagement, whatever it is, it starts to fall apart. But you have to surrender to it. And it feels painful, but you've just got to get through that and understand it's the birth of something new. And like I just said before, pain screams the loudest when it's dying. You've got to allow it to scream. It will try and hold on to you and claw you back in. And it's easy to put that Band-Aid on, but you've got to let it go, surrender, because it's the birth of something new.
An increasing theme on this show from all the amazing people who have come on it, which you've just shared there, it's the idea of embracing and leaning into change rather than resisting it. It's such an important thing to do.
Yeah, 100%. Because, naturally we want to, we're wired to avoid stress. We want to go the path of least resistance. And really at what do we do at Breakpoint? We embrace short-term discomfort for long-term change, long-term gain.
Love it. Well, let's now move into the Win the Day rocket round. 10 questions with some quick answers. You up for this one, Ollie?
Yeah, man. I'm crap at doing short answers, though.
It
might take longer than the podcast itself.
Number one, what quote inspires you the most?
Nothing was ever great unless at some point you doubted your ability to achieve it. That's something I came up with. It might have been printed somewhere else, but I don't know. I came up with that. It's in my book, Battle Ready, yeah. But
huge. Number two, morning coffee or evening wine?
Neither, because I don't drink coffee or wine.
Number three, what's one bit of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
To look internal. The answers are internal, not external.
Number four, what book do you gift the most?
My book, Battle Ready. And I'm not doing that as a pitch. The fact that, that book changed my life and it's changing other people's.
You can see it. I mean, just go and look at the ratings it's got on Amazon. It is a movement around the world, Battle Ready and Breakpoint. So go and check it out. Number five, was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
I don't know if it's a vulnerability, but the fact, I reflect on that, like the fact that my biggest downfall or my biggest obstacle, my biggest downfall was my greatest discovery. And that was when I was forced to look within.
Number six, what's one thing you've learned about failure?
That it's a weapon. As long as you learn from it. At the end of the day, we've got to keep on failing. If we're not failing, we're not challenging ourselves enough. So really got to understand, I think it's really important for especially younger viewers, embrace failure. In this world that's being painted around us on social media, everyone faking perfection. You've got to learn that failure is a weapon. As long as we learn, we grow, we move on. Embrace failure. It's a weapon. Learn from it. So well said. Number seven, if you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone alive or dead, who would it be? Bob Proctor. Number eight, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business? I hate to say it, but my phone. Addictive little things, aren't they? Yeah, they're a blessing and a curse, though. So it's limiting your time with them. I'm by no means addicted to my phone, but it is an absolute asset to my business. Number nine, share one thing on your bucket list. God, I think I've done them all, mate. So I want to go to the moon. Yes, there we go. Just leave Earth. Let's go and get space travel. Let's go. I want to see if the Earth is flat or round. Take me with you. That'd be great fun. And final question, what's one thing you do to win the day? What I do to win the day is I follow my morning routine religiously. I give myself something every day. That's in front of my wife, kids, anyone. It's about me being selfish, investing in myself before anyone else. And the more I can do that to create the foundation of strength, I'll bear the storm.
There are a bunch of ways to connect with Ollie, and we'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow him on Instagram at ollie.ollerton. Grab a copy of his amazing books on Amazon and see the incredible work he's doing with Breakpoint at break.point.co.uk. Again, all of that and more will be linked in the show notes. Ollie, what an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Likewise, mate. Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.